All right, welcome back to Niners Nightly as we look ahead to the Niners and the Seahawks the second time around. And who's better to talk Niners and Hawks with than Dave Softy Mahler, the pride of KJR, and he's with us on the UMA guest line as we break it all down. What's up, Dave? How are you, man?
Let's face it, there are probably 8 or 9 people better than me, but I was the 8th or ninth one to agree to come on the show and answer the call. So that's why I'm sitting here right now. I know where I stand on your ladder, baby. I know where I am on the Kruger priority list. Always there to bail you out. When others say no, I'm always the one saying yes. So good to be here. How are you, man?
Yeah, I'm doing great, man. And let's talk a little bit about your Hawks. I'm a big fan of Mike McDonald. Are you?
I don't know yet. I mean, I think I am, right? I think I'm a big fan of Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator who was at UW for those 2 years with Kalen DeBoer and Michael Penix. I think I'm a big fan of everybody on this coaching staff. I mean, I thought it was the right move to get rid of Pete Carroll, even though he was 9-8 a year ago. You don't see coaches that go 500 or better often fired in the NFL. So I still think this is the right call, but I'm trying to figure out how good this team actually is, because here's the problem. They are missing a lot of key pieces on this team, especially on the offensive and defensive lines. I mean, the defensive line I thought was going to be a lot better. You know, Byron Murphy's been banged up, their first-round draft pick. Draymond Jones, who signed the biggest free agent contract in Seahawks history, actually has been kind of AWOL, to be totally honest with you, Larry, for this football team. Boye Mafe has been a little bit inconsistent. The linebacker core has been a total disaster. Both guys the Seahawks signed over the offseason, and Terrell Dodson and Jerome Baker, have either been cut or traded by this football team. And this is a general manager that let Jordan Brooks walk and let Bobby Wagner go to the Commanders. So the offensive line's been a mess. The linebacker core has been a mess. And if you look at all the offseason moves the Seahawks made, not many of them, if any of them, have panned out. I mean, we sat here over the entire offseason, Larry, talking about, look at all this money the Seahawks have. This is great. Yeah. And it feels like they didn't do a damn thing with it. It feels like they're like an 85-year-old grandma that got scammed by somebody and they lost their entire life savings, because there's really nothing to show for all the money the Seahawks had to spend over the offseason, and they're seeing it right now at 4-5.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the O-line for a second, because I kind of think football kind of starts right there. Seahawks allowed 38 sacks last year. That was the 10th fewest in the NFL. They've already given up 28 sacks in 9 games. That's the 10th most. I know they're getting Abraham Lucas back, but is it as simple as they miss Lucas?
They miss Lucas. They miss a answer at right guard. Connor Williams, the center, has not been great so far. The free agent from Miami, they may have brought him back a little bit too soon, Larry, off that knee injury. Laken Tomlinson's been, but you know what? The guy's pushing 40 years old. There's a reason why he was signed to a 1-year deal. And the right tackle spot has been an absolute turnstile. Yes, I mean, Abe Lucas was supposed to be the right tackle. He got banged up. George Fant was supposed to be his backup. He got banged up. They are now on likely what looks like their 4th-string offensive tackle, and a guy named Mike Jarrell, by the way, who's not been great. Anthony Bradford has been your starting right guard. Christian Haynes, we thought in the 3rd-round draft pick out of UConn, was going to be the starter at right guard, and he hasn't even really played at all this year. There's been games where he's not even active. And then, Olu Oluwatimi, the second-year guy from Michigan who won the Outland Trophy Award 2 years ago, he was supposed to be your center, but he can't even get a snap. And that's why they went out and signed Connor Williams. So, look, man, Larry, you know this. Every GM and every head coach, for the most part, they got a hole in their game when it comes to building a franchise. And John Schneider's hole in his game has been the offensive line. It's been the number one problem with this football team so far after 9 games. There are times where their offense can't even function because the offensive line's been so bad.
What happened to Damian Lewis? I mean, I always liked Dame. I loved him at LSU. I thought he was a Hulk with you guys, and then all of a sudden he walked in free agency. Was it just he got paid too much and they couldn't afford him? Is that it?
Too much money. There's been a couple guys like that have walked in free agency where the Seahawks just said, we're not going to pay that. Look, the Hawks are very stubborn when it comes to their salary cap. They have a number that they believe a player is worth, and if that player is asking for more than X and wants Y, adios amigo. They'll kick their asses out of here. The problem is I think the Seahawks may have to start overpaying for offensive linemen because they can't develop them. They can't draft them. I mean, Charles Cross has been okay at left tackle, maybe above average at left tackle, but everybody else on the offensive line has either been a total bust or banged up. Even the guys that play well, they just can't find a way to keep healthy. So, it's a huge problem right now with John Schneider as the GM of this football team that they just don't have the offensive line to run the offense that Ryan Grubb wants to run, which is, let's face it, dropping Geno Smith back and getting the ball to DK Metcalf as much as possible.
Grubb is interesting, but I mean, the Seahawks ranked 28th in rushing yards per game, 23rd in yards per carry, 4.1. They're 31st in designed rush rate. They go with run plays on only 31.2% of their offensive snaps. Nobody throws it more. Nobody runs it less. Why is it when you have Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet, two pretty good backs, that they just show no interest at all in committing to the run game or developing any kind of a run game?
Well, I'd push back a little bit on Charbonnet. I just think he's just a guy.
You don't like Charbonnet?
I mean, well, it's not that I don't like him. I mean, he's probably a better third option than a second option, to be totally honest with you. I mean, for all the teams out there that are playing two backs now in college football and the NFL, I think Charbonnet is probably a better third than a second, but Kenny Walker's a stud. And to answer your question about why they're not running the ball, twofold. Number one, they're not very good at it when they do it, right? That's a problem. And then number two, Ryan Grubb wants to build this offense around Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Tyler Lockett. And I think he's right to do that because they're paying these guys a bunch of money to be superstars. They're paying DK Metcalf to be one of the elite wide receivers in the NFL. I mean, Geno Smith is obviously making just, $25-30 million a year. His cap number is going to go up big time next year, but he's a decent paid quarterback, and he's got the skills to get the ball down the field. But they do need to balance this out a little bit more. I think they've been a little crazy with the run-pass ratio. Part of that was that Kenny Walker was hurt, Larry, for a little bit, so he wasn't even available. Now that he's back, and now that this offensive line is getting potentially Abe Lucas back starting this Sunday against you guys, I'm really curious to see how much they go with the run versus the pass. But they just have not been able to get any real consistent running game going for whatever reason up here.
What's been the talk recently about Geno now that Russell's in Pittsburgh playing well? I mean, Geno's tied for the league leading picks with 10. He had 3 in the last game. He's been sacked 28 times in 9 games, more than all but 3 quarterbacks. What is your feeling on Geno, and how would you take phone calls and talk to the fans? What's the fans' feeling on Geno? Is he the answer long term? Are they going to draft a quarterback in the first round? Where's that going?
Well, they got to draft a quarterback, period. I mean, it doesn't have to be in the first round. They just got to find somebody, day 1, day 2, top of day 3, whatever. They got to find the next star at that position. And Geno Smith is not it. I think Geno Smith is a very serviceable quarterback. I think Geno Smith has done more than anybody thought he would do since he took over, Larry, for Russell Wilson. I mean, this is now his 3rd year here in Seattle since Russell Wilson left. And if you would have told me 3 years ago that Geno Smith would still be here starting, I would have said you're crazy. I mean, by that point in time, he's going to be gone and somebody else will be taking over. So good on him for even being here this long. We did a people's court after the last game, by the way. And it was like 6-1. The offensive line is the bigger problem with this football team than Geno Smith. And I agree. I just think we're not going to see the real Geno Smith. We're not going to see the real Ryan Grubb or the real DK Metcalf until they figure out this freaking offensive line. And it's been a problem for a long time, even going back to Pete Carroll. So I think it's more of a line problem, Larry, than it is a Geno Smith problem. But then you watch guys like Baker Mayfield that drop back within a second and a half and get rid of the football fast. We'll start to see more of that, I think, against you guys on Sunday. They're going to start to go to the quick game, maybe a little bit more, use DK on those inside slant routes, Jackson Smith and Jigba, on those sweeps, getting him in space, Kenny Walker out in the open with room to run. I think you'll start to see a little bit more of that on Sunday against the Niners because they simply put don't have the offensive line to protect this guy when he takes a 7-step drop.
McDonald's the new guy. Schneider's been there. They are 4-5. Are the fans calling for? Are there people that are unhappy with Schneider and want him out, or what's his status?
Oh yeah, I mean, come on, man. There's people that want John Schneider out. They want Pete Carroll back. They want Ryan Grubb fired. They want Mike McDonald canned. He's not the guy. They want Geno Smith traded. They want DK Metcalf, traded at the deadline or cut, whatever. I mean, you get it all up here in Seattle, right? Everybody's got a mouth and everybody's got a freaking opinion coming out of their mouth, which I guess is good for this business. But there's been a little bit of rumbling about, hey, like you asked me at the top, are you a fan of Mike McDonald? And again, I think so because the guy's got a great track record as a defensive play caller everywhere he goes, from Michigan to Baltimore to the NFL. And I think in the end, that's what this football team needs to be all about. I mean, Larry, let's face it. You hired Mike McDonald to have a great defense. That's why you hired Mike Macdonald. That's why Pete Carroll was here, to have a great defense. And when that defense began to fall apart, there really wasn't any point to Pete Carroll anymore, right? And if Mike Macdonald can't get this defense figured out, and if John Schneider can't give him the right pieces to get it figured out, there may not be any real point to him. But we are so far away from making that call, dude. We are years away from making that call. They've got some really good pieces on their defense, and Devin Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen, Julian Love, Byron Murphy, Draymond Jones, Leonard Williams, Boye Mafe up front, players like that. They just have not been able to put it all together, and I'm not surprised by that because they played 9 games together as a brand new defense. I mean, their best game as a defense may have been that Rams game, as a matter of fact, and what they did against Matt Stafford and Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, although that doesn't look as good after what we saw last night, after what the Dolphins did to those guys on Monday night, by the way. So he's just got to have time to get these pieces in, and this defense, Larry, they rely on elite communication. And they've had 9 games to work on that. I would expect that to get better as the year goes by. But that linebacker core has got to be fixed for sure, because right now it's a disaster.
One more on Grubb. He coordinated the offense at Fresno State. They threw it a ton. He coordinated the offense at UW. They threw it a ton. Yeah. You think of McDonald, you think, okay, he's a defensive coach. They're going to want to come in, establish the old Seahawk run game. And then, man, if they play defense in Seattle the way they played it in Baltimore under McDonald, Seattle's got something going. Instead, I'm looking at Seattle. Their average distance to convert on third down right now is an NFL high 8.9 yards. So they're not getting it done on first and second down at all. And then they're just putting a lot of pressure on Geno to make it all happen on third down.
Oh, and you go back to that Rams game, and I mean, they're trying to run the ball on first down. They're going nowhere. It's 2nd and 8. It's 2nd and 9, right? And then people get pissed off when you throw the ball. Well, why do you think you're throwing the ball? Because you can't run the ball on first down. But we see glimpses of this offense. Like the light bulb is like zzz, zzz, zzz. It's just it's trying to turn on, Larry. The light bulb is trying to turn on. We had a span with about 3 minutes to go in the second quarter to about the 10-minute mark of the fourth quarter, where the Seahawks had 4 drives in their last game. On 3 of the 4 drives, they had 193 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that is when Geno threw the pick 6 on the 3rd drive when they got down to inside the Ram 10-yard line. They had another drive where they had a sack, a false start, a holding penalty, and it blew the drive up. But they have moments like that where people really get a feel and a taste of what this offensive line and what this football team can do on offense. So it's frustrating for a lot of people.
It's interesting too to me that, the Seahawks released Terrell Dodson. 9 games with Seattle. He had 71 tackles, 2 sacks, 5 tackles for a loss, 1 forced fumble. But I talked to you earlier this year. You didn't like Dodson when we talked earlier this year. You didn't like Jerome Baker. And then since they've traded Jerome Baker to the Titans for Ernest Jones, and they just cut Dodson, and they're going with Tyrese Knight, who I loved in the draft, the 4th-round pick out of UTEP. What is going on? Was Dodson and Baker just not getting it done? I mean, it seems like you centered on that early on.
Well, what drives me nuts in this business, and you may feel the same way, is that every time a player signs with your team, he's automatically exponentially better, right? Like you could have called this guy a bum yesterday, but the fact that the Niners signed him, or the fact that the Seahawks signed him, or the Mariners or whoever, oh, this guy's great. Look at this. No, he stinks. There's a reason why he's on a 1-year deal. And both these guys, Dotson and Baker, were on 1-year prove-it deals in Seattle. All right, we saw Patrick Queen get a big deal with Baltimore. With Pittsburgh. We saw Jordan Brooks get a big deal in Miami. We're seeing the way Bobby Wagner's playing right now with the Commanders. So that was a huge mistake by John Schneider, and I think Mike Macdonald as well, to let those guys walk and spend their money on Dotson and Baker, who didn't even make it to week 10 for crying out loud. So, yeah, I mean, they just weren't getting the job done whatsoever, man. The defense was totally breaking down. They're not very good against the run. They're not very good against the pass. They're not getting after the quarterback. All these are issues, and I believe it starts with the front 7, but it's a lot easier to get rid of those linebackers because both guys were on 1-year contracts.
Did teams actually call John Schneider asking for DK Metcalf at the trade deadline, and were the Hawks even considering trading him?
I don't think so, but I do think he got calls. There's no doubt he got calls. I mean, I think these GMs get calls on everybody, every day, right? I mean, Jack Sorenzik, the old Mariner GM, used to tell me he'd get calls on Felix Hernandez every single day, before the deadline would hit in July. I mean, hey, just you never know. Some idiot makes a call, offers, 5,000 draft picks in their entire major league roster. Maybe you do the deal. So I think it's in his best interest to take those calls, but there was never any real serious talks about it because I think what the Hawks were asking for was probably a first-round draft pick in return for DK Metcalf, if not even more than a first-round draft pick in return for DK Metcalf. And let's face it, if you traded DK Metcalf, what would you be looking to get with that first-round draft pick you got back in return? Another DK Metcalf, right?
Sure.
And DK Metcalf has already proven. So how about this? How about instead of talking about trading DK, and I get worked up when people bring this up, Larry. All right, you're getting me all crazy here. When people start talking about trading DK, I get pissed off. No, don't trade DK. Why don't you fix the freaking line and give your quarterback more time to throw to get the ball to DK Metcalf? How's that sound, you moron, for crying out loud? Jesus, what are we doing up here?
What do you think of Jackson Smith Enigba? Are you a fan of his? He was a first-round draft choice just a year ago. How do you like him?
I love him. I love Jackson Smith and Jig, but just got to find a way to use him. I mean, he is the exact kind of guy you want in this offense because if you can get him in space, he is going to run for miles, man. This guy is just starting now to come on a little bit, I think, too. Took a little time to kind of work him into the system and get the guy the ball. The dude that's been suffering a little bit has been Tyler Lockett. I mean, he's an old man. Obviously, he's kind of up there in age. Just announced he's having a baby on social media, so congrats to him. But it might be time for Tyler Lockett to start thinking about life after football and being a dad. And it's funny because he's already thinking about life after football because he's selling houses up here in Seattle. I'm not sure if you know that or not, but Tyler Lockett is a real estate agent. He's got a real estate license, and he sells homes up here, over the offseason, just like the guys back in the day had to work second jobs because Tyler Lockett's not making enough money, so he's going to take money out of those other poor bastard real estate agents that don't have the marketing dollars or the name recognition that Lockett's got. He's going to pile on and start selling houses too. But Jackson Smith and Jigba is a stud. They just got to find a way to get this guy worked into the offense, and they will. All of this, Larry, I'm telling you, starts with the offensive line.
That'd be just the image of Tyler Lockett, putting an A-frame on the corner and sprinting across the street with a box of donuts to get back the open house. It's just classic.
Yeah, I don't think he's putting those signs on. I'm pretty sure he's got an assistant to do that for him. But don't you feel bad for the struggling real estate agent who's just scraping by to sell a house, and here comes Tyler Lockett? Oh, I'll sell it for you. What the hell?
Right,
dude?
exactly.
Come on, man. Give me a break.
You want to buy from Sheila? Sheila never caught a pass on 3rd and 10.
Right.
Hey, one of the questions that we've been getting here, I mean, you guys got a glimpse of it in the first game, is the special teams for the Niners is a circus. And in the first Seattle game, Laviska Shenault almost took the opening kickoff back and then did take one back later in the game. And Shenault is not exactly, Devin Hester. But you tell us about Brian Schneider, Dave, because you know more about him than we do. What was his rep when he was there? He's not getting it. I mean, I don't want to say he's not getting it done, but the Niners special teams this year under Schneider have been abysmal. I can't walk down the street without 3 people coming up to me saying, "Fire Schneider."
Right.
Tell us about Schneider. What was his rep up there? How did you view him?
Well, he had a really good rep up here because he was a part of that Super Bowl champion team, right? I mean, anybody who wins a Super Bowl is going to have a pretty good reputation up in Seattle. The guy was here for, 11 years, right? And then left in 2020. So, I mean, when you've got Percy Harvin returning kicks for you, when you've got Stephen Hauschka nailing everything, when you got John Ryan booting the ball 50 yards down the field, and when you're not really worried about special teams because the LOB is holding everyone to 10 points a game and Marshawn Lynch and Russell Wilson are tearing up the NFL on the offensive side of the ball, special teams was just never an issue here, right? Because the Seahawks were so elite on both sides of the ball when Schneider was here. But I don't remember a lot of complaints about Brian Schneider as the special teams guy. I mean, when you're covering the Seahawks from 2012 to 2015, the LOB era, everything is gold. Like when you guys are winning championships down there, which I know has not happened in your lifetime, Larry. It's been 30 plus years since you won a Super Bowl, so you wouldn't know anything about that. But I think when you're winning titles, everybody is golden, right? Like the special teams coach, the running back coach, the tight end coach, the assistant to the assistant. Everybody wants to talk to everybody. And Brian Schneider was a part of that when he was here. So I think Brian Schneider's got a really good rep in Seattle, but I can understand if things aren't going well, how people would point to special teams and start to criticize the special teams coach for that. Let me just tell you this. When you're ripping the special teams coach, Larry, you got much bigger problems than special teams. Trust me.
Do you ever have him on your show? He's a nice guy.
Oh, yeah. Great guy. Phenomenal dude. Yeah. Really, really good guy. Really, really good guy. Went through some personal stuff, obviously off the field. Not sure if that's been talked about or documented down there. But really, really good dude, and no problems with him up in Seattle.
What are you expecting for Niners Seahawks the second time around? Do you think the Niners are going to get a convincing win? Do you think the Seahawks are going to come out of the bye and solve with Lucas on the O-line and commit to the run and have a epic performance? I mean, they've lost 5 of 6, Dave, but there's an awful lot of games left. It seems like if they probably have a little fight left in them. I think this could be a tougher game than the Niners think. How do you see it?
I think you're facing a desperate Seahawks football team, guys, right now. I mean, they've lost 5 of 6. They haven't won a game since October 20th. If they lose this game to you guys on Sunday, they're going to go a calendar month without winning a football game. If they lose this one, it's 6 out of 7. Their second 3-game losing streak in the last 7 weeks. The heat on McDonald, the heat on Grubb will get turned up for sure. So I think you're seeing a desperate team, but I do think what you'll see this weekend is the Seahawks try and get Kenny Walker the football, 20-plus touches, whether on the ground or through the air. The guy's a great pass catcher. Like I said earlier, he can run and catch with the ball. And we'll see what this new-look linebacker core looks like, without Dodson out there. I mean, Tyrese Knight's going to start along with Ernest Jones. We call him Quad, the 4th up here in Seattle. So we'll see if the linebacker switch makes any difference in this game on Sunday. But I like the line. I think the Hawks are getting 6.5 or 7 at most sports books. I'd probably take the Hawks and the points in this one because I think you're facing a wounded animal that's fired up coming off the bye, pissed off and angry that things haven't gone well. And I also thought for as bad as the game looked in the box score, the Seahawks defense actually played pretty well in that Rams game. They gave up 13 points in regulation to the Rams. So I'm starting to wonder if the scheme is starting to kind of click and kick in for McDonald, man.
Would you say the MVP in the first half of the Seahawks would be who? Kenneth Walker? I mean, he had a decent, productive. I mean, he obviously they don't run a lot, but for a team that doesn't run a lot, the guy scored some touchdowns. That's for sure.
Yeah, God, I don't even know who the MVP would be. I mean, maybe DK, but he's been out the last couple of weeks. DK hasn't played. I mean, DK Metcalf has got 570 yards in 7 games for the Seahawks and was on pace for a career high in targets before he went down. So, look, I mean, I've seen what this offense looks like without DK Metcalf in the Buffalo game and the Ram game, and I don't like it. So I think in the end, 14 is going to be the guy.
Last one. Are the Niners the most hated Seahawk opponent? Do Seahawks view the Niners as their number one rival, or is it Rams? Is it somebody else? Is it somebody we're not thinking of?
No, it's definitely San Francisco. I mean, good news for you.
There's a good dose of hatred, huh?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but I can't stand you. I mean, just coming on this radio show just makes me want to vomit, to be honest with you. But no, I mean, you're lucky that Russell Wilson's not here because Russell Wilson owned the Niners when he was the starting quarterback for the Seahawks. I mean, you guys were calling him daddy by the time this thing was all said and done. And ever since Russell Wilson took off, things have began to shift a little bit. But it's hard to get really heated about the rivalry right now when there's so many people back here pissed off about the way the Seahawks are playing. Like if the Hawks were a 7-2 football team right now and you guys were 8-1 or vice versa, I think there'd be a lot more kind of smack talk going back and forth. But, right now we're just talking about who's the tallest dwarf here for crying out loud, 2 bums fighting over a quarter, before this game. I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing allowing the freaking Cardinals to take over first place in this division? Are you kidding me? Between the Niners and Seahawks, what the hell has gone wrong that's allowed the Cardinals and Kyler Murray to take over first place in the NFC West? It's a tragedy.
I don't want to ask you a big question at the end, but I got to throw this one in at the end. You're watching Russell Wilson now in Pittsburgh, and he's got 6 touchdowns and 1 pick, and he looks pretty good.
I'm happy for him. Yeah.
Why did it end there? What I mean, you said it. You won a championship with him. He owned the Niners.
Right.
To me, he always played really, really smart football. But you guys became disenchanted with him, and the fan base became disenchanted. And now I'm looking at the Seahawks, and I'm thinking, are they better? Would they be better off with Russell? I think they probably would be better off with Russell. Would they be better off with Russell right now? And why did it end there for Russell?
Well, first of all, if Russell Wilson were still here, he'd be making $60 million a season on a brand new contract. Second of all, he'd still be the diva that he was when he was here. Because third of all, he wouldn't have been humbled yet the way he was humbled in Denver. I think going to Denver and getting humbled by Sean Payton and the entire NFL media was exactly what Russell Wilson needed, man. I mean, he was getting weird here. He was turning into a diva. There was the story that broke that he tried to get Pete Carroll fired when he was the head coach of the Seahawks, and that's just not going to work, Larry. I don't know about you, man, but when you have a subordinate trying to get a boss fired, and the superior over your boss is saying no, that relationship is kind of DOA at that point. That's not going to work when the quarterback is trying to get the head coach whacked. So he just needed a big fat dose of humble pie, and he got that in Denver. And all the things that we were saying about Russell Wilson here in Seattle, you know, the weird Twitter posts, the way he talks, he's got all these different accents. He's not hanging out with anybody on the team. He's got kind of a, identity crisis a little bit. All those things were true, but nobody talked about it because we're up here in Alaska and nobody out there is paying attention. Now you're hearing everybody across the country saying stuff like that. But I think he needed to be humbled. I think he's playing like a guy who had his career flashing in front of him. I'm happy for him. I was rooting against him in Denver just because of the draft capital the Seahawks got in that trade, Larry, back for the Broncos, but that's now exhausted and that's over. So I hope he does well. Hope he comes back one day, gets his name in the Ring of Honor, which he will. He'll get his due, no question, down the road, but I think he had to leave Seattle to really rediscover the kind of guy he's playing like in Pittsburgh. That was never going to happen here.
Dave, you're the man. Thanks for the time. Any good yelling before you want to leave? I mean, I would say Niners are going to win this game by 10 to 12 points. Probably going to be a pretty convincing win.
Yeah, why don't you find somebody in that town that remembers what it's like to win a Super Bowl before you start popping off for crying out loud. Hey, look, I don't even know why we're doing this. Honestly, like, why are we doing this? You guys are a basketball town now, man. Forget football. You're a freaking basketball town with Golden State. Why don't we talk when you guys come close to winning a championship? Why don't we talk when you can actually go grab a Lombardi trophy online and take it home the way I did 11 years ago? Why don't we start talking when anybody in that damn town remembers what it's like to win a Super Bowl? All right. Anyone that remembers what it's like to win a championship is either in a nursing home or dead. All right. So get back to me when that changes.
I don't know if it's a basketball town, but just remember this. KD played more seasons here than he did there.
Yeah, nobody cares, by the way.
How bitter was that, man? You draft KD as a rookie, you play 1 year with this awesome player, and then the team bolted? Seattle NBA needs to go back to Seattle ASAP.
By the way, you're breaking up. I can't hear you. What was that? Your phone's breaking up. I'm starting to lose the connection. Sorry, I lost you.
Dave, good stuff, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, buddy. See ya.
Dave Softy Mahler from KJR stopping by. It's Niners Nightly on the Sports Leader.